Up until right now, our panel is fluid. I'll let you introduce yourselves and our wonderful moderator you've heard from today.
Hi, I'm Ashler Macko. I'm the VP of Operations at the FinOps Foundation. The FinOps Foundation is part of the Linux Foundation, so y'all probably familiar with CNCF. We are one of their projects, and I just volunteered to moderate, so we'll see what questions I can come up with on the fly.
Okay. Oh, hi, I'm Angelo Mandato. I'm an entrepreneur and software developer, previously also a CIO.
I am Dave Stoffaker. I am an AWS hero, and I work at Direct Supply up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And is this on? Oh, and I am Katelyn Decraene, Senior Cloud Finance Manager here at Morningstar. I've been with Morningstar for about 7.5 years now. In this role for 5 years, and had an accounting background, did not have a tech background. So now here I am.
So I'll start. One of the things that I try to debunk is like a lot of people think that FinOps is just cost optimization. So what would you guys say to that?
Well, I'll take a first whack. FinOps is a combination of like architecture, the software architecture, as well as the costs involved and everything that runs in it. At least that's how I view it.
Go ahead. I was just say, I think the platform and the software that you're running really informs the amount you're spending in the cloud too. If you have a really inefficient database call that's or web page that just your splash page takes 80 database calls that mean nothing to happen, you're sizing up for a much greater need than you actually have. So in the end, FinOps is tied to a cost reduction or cost optimization, or knowing that you're running at the right appropriate level of spend, but it's also that engineering layer to uncover those inefficiencies at the technology stack that help drive improved cost management.
I think kind of piggybacking on what you both said, the efficiency piece is what I try to drive home. I feel like a lot of times you hear FinOps cost optimization, there's a stigma around it that it's cost cutting, and it's really about, making sure that there's this myth, I feel like early on, that most people thought that things were just cheaper in the cloud, and it's not necessarily the truth. It's that you have to architect to be cheaper in the cloud. So it's making sure that we're taking advantage of those efficiencies that are out there.
The other thing we talk about a lot in the FinOps framework is different personas. So I'm kind of curious for you all, like, what are all the personas that are involved in a FinOps practice? And then, given that you had a background in being a CIO before, like, what would you want out of a FinOps practice to help you navigate making decisions?
Well, first you need someone to be a constant learner. So if anybody that's in the FinOps position in your company, you want them to be able to keep track of trends and what's happening, and knowledge that they should start, being more exposed to, and also send them to as many conferences related to FinOps as possible. Just the one I attended in April, I found out that it seems simple, but just enable encryption even between your servers and servlets or whatever inside your availability zone will save money, just because it'll save that little bandwidth between the zones.
You have a background in finance, right? You said
Yes.
What is the involvement in finance with FinOps these days?
So that's been, I guess, a hotter topic at Morningstar nowadays. So for a little background, we have cloud services team, which is dedicated to the adoption of public cloud at Morningstar, and I'm on there. Historically, I've been a woman show on the finance side of things. But as we've scaled, we've learned that's just not sustainable. And so in order to make that more sustainable, we have over 2,000 technologists that are all active. We have really started to work on getting the finance personas, I guess, is from our standpoint, that is the financial analysts that sit in the corporate FP&A group that support all the business units of the teams where the products are being developed. So getting them more involved has been a really big focus this year, especially because they have the business knowledge, of when we're trying to do forecasts with teams. I don't understand, where their product roadmaps are, what that might look like, what their goals are, how new customers translates into, what increase in spend might be from a public cloud standpoint. So I think the finance aspects, not necessarily me being the practitioner from the persona standpoint, having them being involved has been a really crucial I guess, objective for us.
And do you see, like with engineers, do you see like them more progression in their career when they are taking into considerations what the things cost and cost savings? Do you think that's a bigger part of being like an engineer lead that people look for when they're, recruiting or promoting?
So when we first started building an AWS, we took our first year of kind of that building the landing zone and learning the landscape. And we did as much work as we could to standardize everything with Terraform. So any service you want to use has a Terraform module. And we went through and started to compute a cost and a run rate for each of those modules. So it was easier for an engineer to look and say like, okay, if I aggregate this module and this module into my service, then okay, I know this one's $4 an hour, this one's $3 an hour. So okay, do the math, so on and so forth. So that started kind of paving the path towards the cost conversation. Our challenge was that we never have done chargeback before. We didn't even do effective showback. We had best guess back, but that was about it. So we started at the same time developing a language within the culture of what that showback would look like and how much things really run when the businesses have to pay for the resources they're using versus it just comes out of the IT budget. So I think the engineering conversation really kicked up when it became showback. And then when chargeback hit, it was definitely at the front of everyone's mind, because then the questions were, okay, why am I paying X amount for, this service? Or why does it take 50 compute nodes to run this one portion of our platform? So
yeah, is everyone familiar with when he says chargeback and showback, the difference? All right. Do you want to answer that one?
Okay. So showback is you run your financial reports and your cost breakdowns. We drive everything off of tagging on whatever service we're running in AWS. And then we run reports that say like, okay, anything tagged with application A, let's come up with a cost. So anything tagged application A for the month of June cost X amount of dollars. And then we maybe break it down a little bit further than that if they want to see different components. Chargeback is an actual monetary transaction where in IT, we get the bill, we run the reports, and we say, okay, your portion of the total AWS bill for last month was X. And here's exactly the cost that you have to transfer into our account so we can pay the AWS bill. So when there's no language of communicating on budgets or what I call best guess back, like, hey, how much does it cost to run a search platform? I don't know, maybe a few bucks. Then nobody cares. And when it's just showback, they're like, ooh, that's expensive, but I don't have there's not a burning reason that I'm responsible for making that better. But then when a chargeback hits, anyone who's accountable to hitting a budget line item is doing their best to make sure they're managing to budget. So
yeah, that's a good example. And the other principle we talk a lot about in FinOps is like, there are things that need to be pushed to the edge. So the engineers need to be accountable for and doing, and then there's things that get centralized, like buying commitments and, doing an EDP. Love to hear you guys' take on like, what are some of those things that you absolutely think should be always pushed to the edge, and why would you centralize some activities?
I'll go. We have a FinOps team of one full-time person, and his job is all of that. He negotiates the contracts. He negotiates the, what used to be reserved instances, now savings plans. He looks at all of the data in our AWS account, and he's a rock star at it. And he finds all of those ways that we could save money. So before he reaches out to the line of business and says, hey, you're running a little hot on S3 or whatever, he's already done his best to drive that to the best possible cost. So I look at him as the negotiator, and then we come in behind him to clean up any debris left after negotiation. So there's not a whole lot that gets pushed directly to the engineers in our case, because he is so good at covering all of the ground for us. But that said, we do several times a year get pulled together, a few of us, as kind of a, hey, we're going to take on a pet project this sprint, or do it under the guise of a hackathon. He'll say like, oh, I found a way to save like $75,000 a month. We got to do this. It looks pretty easy. Pull a couple of us together for a couple of days, and we'll do our darndest to try and improve things.
I always tell people if you don't have a FinOps person, like beg, borrow, and steal someone for a couple months to work on a project. So kind of the exact same thing. Yeah. Why might you want to centralize things like commitments? I'm just curious if you guys could chime in on why maybe that's not every engineer should go buy commitments.
All right, so we have several different lines of business that all fall under one corporate umbrella. We are one company, we are one direct supply. And so if we had multiple people only looking out for their own territory, they may be trying to save money in ways that, okay, they save the money, but then they turn something off and they've still got this prepaid commitment that if we're centralizing it, we can absorb that in other areas of the business. And it's kind of, we're covering all of our assets instead of somebody taking a different approach or overcommitting and underutilizing.
Yeah, I'll say previously when I was at Pearson doing this, I knew maybe before most people things that we were going to sell off too. So you'd be like, oh, well, we need to not buy a 3-year commitment on this because it's going to, be gone in another couple months. So there's certain strategic things that only key people are aware of too. And I think that's what plays into it. Can one of you all describe crawl, walk, run first? And then I'll ask what maybe crawl, walk, run would look like in a forecasting situation.
I can take a look. So I know crawl, walk, run is used commonly in FinOps to talk about the different stages of where you're at in your maturity of, adopting FinOps. As far as, crawling and like the differences between those 3 stages, there's different buckets that you can be evaluated on. For example, if from a reporting standpoint, crawling might be that you're ingesting the bill and you're showing that back, just as it is on the bill. Maybe walking would be that you're putting it into, some type of dashboard report on it, and run might be, you've adopted some more advanced mechanism of not even ingesting that data, putting it into a tagging scheme, and actually being able to charge it back based on whatever your mechanisms are, having that all automated and spitting out monthly.
Yeah, I think that's important. Is like with FinOps teams, they're doing all these BAU activities, business as usual things like buying reservations, dealing with the bill every month, right? And then they're trying to build these capabilities. So build better forecasting, build better reporting, build better automation. And so they're always kind of balancing what they have to get done every day and then like making things better for scale. And that's what the crawl, walk, run comes in a lot. And we find some companies are like, I just want to walk at this one capability. Like I never want to do chargeback. We just want to keep everything central. And we just want to, we'll always be, walking at that, but we're going to be accelerating in showback. So next question I kind of have is, how does someone get started with FinOps? What would be kind of your advice for that?
Well, I'll throw out this as, and we're talking about crawling first before you walk or run in the process, but not to skip that first one, but tagging is almost critical. And actually, I would almost say that as long as you tag everything within your different services, that gives you the capability to decide what do I put focus on and what is not costing us much anyway, so it's not worth the effort.
What was your advice on tagging strategy? Do you have any tags you can throw out there like you're doing, or how many? Just curious.
I personally try to keep things simple. And actually, if things get real complicated, I'll rather have a separate AWS account and segregate services and features that way. And then the master account tags them by the account. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think.
I think keeping things simple. I know we kind of struggle with this because there are teams that want to kind of do their own thing and they have their own way of communicating. So they want to tag for this specific thing. But if we let everyone do that, I think we'd have about 3,000 different tags that, so based on what teams have kind of gone, we obviously only enable, I think there's 6 total that we actually have that are live in the billing. But I will say tagging is a big one. That's, looking back, if there's things that I wish we had done better job of, or, enforced early on, that's certainly one of the areas because, getting the technologist engineers in the mindset of actually doing that is hard to fix that behavior when you've gone so long without enforcing it. So, yeah.
I'll just put a plug in there for infrastructure as code. When you start with infrastructure as code first, you can bake all of the tagging into it automatically, and people will follow the path of least resistance. So if they have to think about all these tags, they're never going to do it. If they have to do it manually, it's not going to happen. But if you have it built into everything they want to spin up so that it's tagged, and then also having some rules, excuse me, on the backside that, okay, they deploy something without tags, well, that thing goes away. And they're emailed and said, try tagging next time. You can keep your stuff. I think that goes a long way towards kind of helping get that in there. As far as things we care about for tagging, it's really which line of business is responsible for the spend. And maybe it's a corporate entity or it's one of our different revenue platforms. And then we care about things like who's the owner. Everything has to have an owner tag, and it can be a team email address. Doesn't have to be a person, but we care about having that owner defined. And then our kind of golden three are application, environment, and role. So what application does it tie to? Is it dev? Is it QA? Is it production? And then the role it serves. Oh, this is the storage platform for the e-commerce site, or, this is reporting or whatever. We keep a golden list of tags. And then our FinOps guy gets a report on things that don't fit that list. And then he can do a little bit of, investigative sleuthing to figure out which tags need updating. So
that's awesome. Switching gears a little bit, what type of other teams have you intersected within the organization? Like, have you had any things where FinOps and security intersect, or FinOps and like a TBM organization, FinOps and software asset management? What does that look like if you've had that experience?
I can take that one. Definitely intersected with various areas. Security is definitely one. We have a internal, I'm blanking on the name right now, IT like service catalog that we're working with. I work with quite a bit to, ingest a lot of the data. The way that we have our account set up in AWS is based on teams. So, ingesting some of that data and aligning it with our IT catalog along with our tagging. The top of my head, I'm trying to remember but there's definitely other areas that we intersect with, and a lot more than you would think, just realizing how, important it is that you're, in communication with different parts of the business, different groups.
Yeah, I always refer to it as like the FinOps hug. I feel like we're like the communication coach between some of these teams sometimes too. Yeah. What is one challenge you're facing right now in the FinOps space? Like, we talked about a lot about tagging, but like, what's the one big challenge that you have, or what do you see coming in the next couple months for you?
I can take this one on. One of the challenges right now. So we were historically had a showback model. We've moved to a chargeback model, and we are getting the FAs that support the actual business units, P&Ls, more involved. The challenge I'm having right now is the training piece of the FAs, getting them up to speed on just because I know that they have so many other things on their plate. They're also, in charge of forecasting and planning for all the other revenue and expenses in their P&Ls, but trying to help them, just understand what cloud, computing costs are, the dynamic nature of them, how teams can go about forecasting, what tools are out there. So one of the challenges is just feeling like it's a lot of information to unload onto them. What's, a good path forward? I feel like I'm kind of repetitive in some aspects of, things. Where do you find that kind of in between of giving them, the right amount of knowledge to be able to, help on their own, but also not, you can overload someone with the information of FinOps very easily too. So that's definitely one kind of challenge area right now that I'm working through.
I'd say change management. I know our FinOps guy is constantly chasing down what changed or what happened. And it's trying to pivot things so that people are giving him a heads up like, oh, hey, by next week, we're going to be moving everything into this new service and expect that bill to jump by X%. That's not a well choreographed plan at this point. It's kind of one-off. So I think that's a big challenge we have to tackle sooner than later.
Yeah, I see that the common things I hear about is like training people, like having people that in this role, so getting the talent. And then there's a huge discussion around like tooling. Do we buy? Do we build? And so curious if you've had to make any of those trade-off decisions and, what drives those, especially like buying FinOps tools.
So we go through a cloud reseller for our AWS services, and the tooling is a value add that they provide for us. And they've swapped out their tools I think they're on the second tooling cycle now. So we had experience with a couple different tools in the industry. And so that was part of when we renewed our contract, making sure that we still had access to those tools. So we don't actually spend anything on Cloud Health or Cloud Checker. I can't remember which one we're using these days.
And tools typically aren't plug and play. So do you feel like, is that a role of the FinOps team to like also get that tool in front of the engineer and end up working with your business metadata and so forth?
In our case, it's 100% the FinOps guy making the call. Because a lot of the way we use it is to ingest information from our bills and then parse it out into specific reports that he's crafted within the tool so that he can drive the chargeback. So I leave that entirely up to him and his purview, for sure.
Yeah, speaking from the FinOps first, I guess in my company, I would say that I'm responsible for overseeing and kind of managing that tool. For us, the way that we have our accounts set up, teams have one account for production, one for non-production. So in order for them to get a full view of their costs, I have to create different lens or views, perspectives for them to view their spend, together through a third-party tool rather than just going in the AWS console because of our limitations on, permissions. There's definitely, it's my responsibility for going in, picking out different ways that we take the data and put them in. We use Cloud Health. So perspectives, they call them, turning that into a meaningful way for, whether it be, business leads, business heads, tech heads, financial analysts, or even the engineers themselves to be able to go in and, digest, filter, dig in, drill in on that information. So, yeah.
I think that's an important component is having the resources that can help facilitate that and get out to the business. All right, I got two more questions. Maybe we'll open to the audience. I love the keynote talking about machine learning and AI. How do you see that impacting FinOps in a positive way? And then also, what may FinOps need to be cautious going into those new technologies?
I don't.
Yeah. Too soon to tell, maybe. I think we'll see improved capabilities in predictive analytics and being able to forecast the spend. But I don't know that beyond that, we're going to reap a lot of value in the carving up what we currently have, because that's a pretty prescriptive process for us. And that was a complete and total out of thin air answer. So don't bet your business on that.
All right. And since I'm here from the foundation, not-for-profit organization, I want more people to get into FinOps careers. Leave everybody with maybe like a piece of advice of like why they should consider as a career change.
I can start. If you're somebody who loves learning new things, are excited about or interested in a role that's continuously evolving, you'll never be, at least from what I've felt in this role, you're never going to learn everything you need to know. Things are continuously changing, continuously evolving. You're continuously challenged as new technologies are rolled out, et cetera. This is a great career path, and there's so much value that you can, I think, really quantify in this role.
Yeah, and I'll add too, I think when the term was first kind of becoming really popular in 2018, 19, it felt like it was just another cog in the wheel. Today, FinOps is an integrated part of the team. So your product owner, product manager should have the FinOps person in the same meetings with the engineers, and you're really kind of working towards the same problem now. So you would be part of the rest of the team is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add, Angela. That was a great answer. Yeah, I think FinOps is going to become way more pervasive as cloud adoption continues to grow. And I think we're going to start seeing it, it's going to leave the spreadsheets and infiltrate the engineering teams a lot more.
These guys did so good. None of these questions were well rehearsed, so.